All right, good morning again. We found a better microphone this time, and hopefully you can hear me okay. Our virtual tour from Europe, of course, this time I don't have COVID, so that might help. This is POD 14. What mountain range makes up a great deal of Switzerland? Now, there are 30 questions over Europe from tomorrow's test, so most of your world history next year in high school will also kind of be based on Europe, so it's important that we kind of know what we got there. Mountain range in Switzerland. That's right, the Alps. All right, so we'll take a virtual tour today. I don't have too much for you to write down. Unless you need something to write down, then we'll quickly get you taking notes on these slides. But as we go around, we'll be starting with the UK, which includes 4 countries. Sometimes we'll mix them together interchangeably. We'll call it Great Britain, England, the UK. Our first stop as we look at some English and Scottish, Walish, and Ireland type of architecture. Our first thing is in Edinburgh. So again, I've never been to the UK, but I got to put that on the bucket list as there are several things to see and sights to see in Scotland. One of the other areas is it's very picturesque. We see the Highlands in Scotland here most of the time, and we mentioned, well, the first picture was at night. The climate of Ireland and England and Iceland, even though they're very far away from the equator, it's that Gulf current or the Gulf Stream that keeps the climate relatively mild compared to how far they are actually away from the equator. So they should actually be much cooler, you would think. However, with that winds and mild climate conditions, you also get a lot of cloud cover. So when looking at some foliages here, it doesn't really look too much different except for the background kind of set on the side of a mountain. They call this, it's a callus or something like that, the Stonehenge of Scotland. Well, not quite as intricate as Stonehenge that we'll see in a couple more slides, but this is, again, stacked stones for thousands of years have been standing there, and we'll have to dive more into it when we get to Stonehenge, the more popular of the two. Again, the Highlands in Scotland here, we look at the landscape. We'll look at the word loch. Now, you will not see the Loch Ness Monster in this little loch area, so it's a lake. But you would see a lot of these walls, so stacked stone walls as far as the eye can see, sometimes goes up and down these roads here, oftentimes to keep some kind of livestock in. As we go across the pond a bit, we'll notice some of the themes from the Middle Ages architecture are castles. So why to build castles, and it's going to be a little bit of our lesson today. But if you see the cliffs and you see the seaside in Ireland, we'll see that it is sometimes dotted with these old buildings. Some of them have withstood the test of time better than others. But as we see this castle here, this is one that is clearly deteriorated. However, there are all kinds of different homes and homesteads in Ireland, like this little number right here. In fact, I think that guy is holding this building up on the left-hand side. This is in County Mayo, and in Ireland they actually do it backwards. Like we would say it's Franklin County, they would call it County Franklin. So this is the old Hopkins Homestead, and it was about in the 1880s that the Hopkinses got out of County Mayo and came over to the United States a couple of years before my grandpa was born. But as we look at the standing thing, this is actually still in the family today. I'd love to go over for a summer and fix this thing up. It could use a little work, but the old stone walls are still actually standing today. You got a little look of the Irish countryside right there on the roof of this thing. Not the best look, but again, still standing, so we'll take it. Not a great vacation destination in County Mayo, Ireland. Ooh, I went to the wrong spot. Westminster Abbey in Big Ben is our first stop as we go across the pond one more time. This is now in Great Britain or England. So as we see Parliament and Westminster Abbey, the clock tower here is one of the more famous ones. Sometimes I'll play that song. It's a YouTube search away. If you've got a grandfather clock in the house, or if your grandparents have a grandfather clock, they can be set to go off every 15 minutes. And Westminster's is one of the chimes that is fairly popular around the world, although very annoying if you're trying to take a nap and it's getting you every 15 minutes. In the daylight here, as we see this a little bit better here, this is the River Thames, Thames, on your test tomorrow. But one of the sights to see in England. As we're looking at a couple of things here, this is in London, the Tower of London, where very famous prisoners have once been held, even some World War II captives, so it wasn't that far away in English history that they still kept prisoners in this place here. Maybe they didn't treat them so well. They've chopped a couple people's heads off also. But when looking at this ancient structure, the Tower of London still stands today and now is more of a tourist destination. But I don't know if you want to talk about the Civic Kings there. We'll see if we can get you a front row seat. Other areas on the Straits of Dover. Straits is a God-made waterway, not a man-made waterway, like a canal. The Straits of Dover and Dover Castle is still standing again today. While looking at the ancient building style here, we'll look at fortification as well as protection from not just the people who live inside the castle, but the people around. This castle was built in 1385 and also England. Now they are not like Dr. Evil. They didn't put frickin' sharks with frickin' laser beams on their heads. You don't get the Austin Powers reference. Either I'm old or you have a bad sense of humor. It wouldn't make a lot of sense to put lots of dangerous things in there because, you know, robbers are going to come once a year, if that, while your children will play outside of the castle more often than that. So it doesn't really make a lot of sense to have moats that are packed with ferocious beasts. But if we look at some of the typical things here, we've got places where archers could stand. We've got the moat. There'd be a drawbridge somewhere. You wouldn't be able to get into your castle. In 1385, they didn't have helicopter pads yet. And as we look at some of the castles that did not stand as well the test of time, some of them have just broken down over the years, but some of the older castles have been kept up pretty well. Warwick Castle, also in England, looks like something fresh out of Harry Potter, if you're a fan. I won't call anybody out. But from 1068, if you look, probably a lot of tuck pointings going on. They probably had to redo windows. But this castle is going to celebrate in your lifetime. Hopefully mine. It's on that 5-year, 10-year, 20-year plan. Don't die. But Warwick Castle will hit the century mark. I'm sorry, the 1,000-year mark, millennial mark. Windsor, in terms of not surface area, but square footage, Windsor Castle is the biggest castle in the world. Now, they don't necessarily use all of these rooms anymore. Well, they keep losing people out of the royal family, for one, but two, you know, the Queen's not spring chicken anymore. She doesn't need all of those rooms. However, this is one of the royal palaces. When looking at castles, I meant to go back. Castles usually were not always for kings and queens, but members of nobility who were responsible for maybe protecting the townsfolk, and if there was barbarians coming in trying to raid Also, they were responsible for collecting taxes in that region, which they then sent to the king or the crown. Uh, Arundel Castle, not Arundel, but Arundel Castle in West Sussex, England, 1042, another millennial castle in our lifetimes. We hope our fingers crossed. But again, the backdrop here is very picturesque of a typical UK skyline, very overcast. And for generations, Irish people have red hair, freckles, a little bit like myself, and they can get away with that with the constant cloud cover. Here is Stonehenge, an hour and a half outside of London, I think. Again, I'd like to go. Um, Ancient civilizations have built standing things over the years. Stonehenge is one of the very picturesque ones to see, and you have to put it on your list if you make it to England. Those huge stones without cranes or forklifts or much civilized machinery were very difficult to get there. Also, those stones can't be found near the property, so they also had to haul them in. So it took a lot of work and a lot of effort to make sure these things were going to stay once they're there. They call this the Eye, the largest Ferris wheel in the world. Completely enclosed capsules on the top, so you can't fall out for those people who are a little squirmish. But the Eye of London is one of the sights to see, and probably going to take a little ride on there to see the whole entire city from the top if you stopped up there. Looks very pretty at night also. Here is London Bridge. Now over the River Thames again, we're looking up. Sorry, back one. We look at a bridge here where they have to raise it and lower it to make sure that ships can go in and out. Now you probably heard the nursery rhyme that London Bridge is falling down, falling down. It has never fallen down, so the nursery rhyme is, as many of your parents sometimes tell you, little lies to get you to go to sleep. In the background of London Bridge here, I believe this building's called the Shard, made out of glass, one of the other picturesque things in London. And London is home to the longest tunnel in the world. In fact, they call it the Channel. Speed trains, which are high-speed rail, is not something we have a lot of in the United States, but some people see as the future of travel because it would be maybe a little more efficient than flying and less time waiting on planes to take off and land. These take off right away and can get up to speeds of 300 miles an hour. Now the tunnel goes, they had to take a tunnel boring machine, TBM. So these cut actually three tunnels underneath the English Channel. So that body of water in between England and France was cut using these tunnel boring machines. And they couldn't just make it in the mud, so they had to go deep into the beneath it to make sure this thing did not collapse and cave in on them. And no, these things have not flooded. No, these things do not leak. But a 31-mile tunnel connects Paris, I'm sorry, well, eventually connects Paris, but connects France to London. In France, La Cathedral de Notre Dame is Notre Dame Cathedral here. Now we look at the architecture. Looks like we're doing some scaffolding work here, and there's always constant restoration going on in these things, especially now. But we see that telltale Catholic thing, the rose window that we saw in predominantly South American countries. The architecture, as we get closer here, is a Gothic style of architecture. Some of the buildings are equipped with these gargoyle things, which keep the pigeons away, but also meant to dwarf the people who are on the ground. Chateau de Choiseul. When in doubt, just kind of make something up as you go. Probably Chanson. But on probably the River Seine outside of Paris. Remember, River Seine will be on your test tomorrow, and also they do things backwards in France. Also, they don't call it the Seine River like we would call it the Mississippi River. They would call it the River Seine. This chateau, once a home, now a hotel. You can stay right there on the water. The Arc de Triomphe in Paris was built around the time of Napoleon. The tallest building in Paris still today, the Eiffel Tower, at 1063 feet tall in 1889. It was built by a guy named Eiffel. Had a little bit of work with building of the Statue of Liberty. Several floors here on the statue or on the Eiffel Tower, and you can go all the way up to the top. Fairly romantic. I mean, guys, Valentine's Day's coming up. Why not get her a gift to the Eiffel Tower? Maybe just get her a souvenir. It's cheaper. In Spain, so as we're moving quickly around Europe, in Spain, again, religion plays a very big role. Predominantly Christian religions here also. This is in Barcelona. You can see the crosses on top, and you can see this thing under construction. Massive, massive stuff. Now, occasionally, Catholics get a little, hey, if you'd spend, $20 billion less on your churches, maybe give some of that money to the poor. Wouldn't be a bad solution. However, I guess we could digress. Moving on from the Sunday attire, or Saturday night if you're Catholic, here is one of the ancient traditions from the Matador, which is a very respected job. Matador is the bullfighter. Now, the old wives' tale is that bulls get really mad when you see red. However, we now find out that bulls are colorblind. But it's the actions and the way that the bullfighter shakes the thing that makes them want to run and charge. Now, occasionally, when you mess with a bull, you get the horns. So sometimes matadors, as it's a dangerous job, it can be fatal. But every time it is fatal for the bull, as at the end of the ceremony, they take the sword out and stab the bull as he runs by. Not so sweet. But if we go down south a little bit, the bulls will have their day. In Pamplona, in July, this ceremony, or holiday, I should say, they release the bulls into the streets. Now, this would be me there, way up there in the nice safe. It's on the 5-year plan. Now, occasionally, some people don't make it here, but they actually herd the bulls, so they put up these kind of things so they're not just running crazy into the countryside. They are going to be kind of funneled into one of these places again where they'll take care of them for a while, and sometimes if the bull is good enough, they would be doing some bullfighting with it. In Russia, as we look at St. Peter's, we look at some other places here. So this is the big square here. The architectural styles that we see here are very, I guess, extraordinary, very intricate. Looks like something in a gingerbread house. We saw this country, I put a picture in the wrong spot. It popped up really early, and I don't know why. And it's right there. Could have frozen it. No pun intended. So lake kind of frozen here. If we're looking at almost looks like ice crystals coming up from the ground. Very picturesque. A lot of Russia looks like this, as it's almost uninhabitable. The Scandinavian countries, this is, I believe, from Finland or Norway. This is above the Arctic Circle. One of the things that you would be able to see in the night sky is the aurora borealis, or northern lights. In Switzerland, This is not farmland that we're used to, as it's very different in the backdrop here, as we see the Swiss Alps in the background of this mountain range here. Nice scenic spot to do your farming, and you can go for a climb after a long day on the tractor. Looks a little higher probably than what I'd want to do. Same thing in Switzerland here, it kind of tucked in to the Alps. You have vacation destinations, sometimes individual houses up and down the riverside. Bordering the Mediterranean, we have the ancient aqueducts, we have the Acropolis, the Parthenon. This hill here is called the Acropolis here. And as we look at the Parthenon, this building here, many of these old Roman structures have withstood the test of time. While in Rome, you can look up for as long as you can, but you may get a sore neck. This is a painting of the Sistine Chapel. I believe they call this creation right here. Done by a famous painter. As we're looking at his work here, we see that he had to spend most of his time on scaffolding on his back to paint this thing. And as he did, it was a very interesting finish. So, as we look at Michelangelo's paintings here, helped out with a guy named Pontello and Dulci, Michelangelo was given most of the credit. In Italy, the boot country, as you can tell, kind of looks like a boot. Individual here, Tuscana, is another famous area in Italy, also from Olive Garden, I think the Zuppa Tuscana, one of my favorite. So in places here, we have the Leaning Tower of Pisa, a little bit of a engineering fail. So looking at the start to finish, it was built in 1173. Now, when we build things today, if I wasn't building mines, I'd like to build houses one day for a living, maybe. But usually we put on the bottom what they call the footer. Usually it's like 1 foot wide. Make sure the house doesn't sink. And based on your climate, you have to dig down to a certain depth to prevent frost from heaving the structure up and down, breaking your foundation, causing some problems. Well, this thing started to lean a little bit, and they stopped working on it for a while. And they realized, hey, it's in decent shape. They took some effort to reinforce it a little bit. Underpin the foundation is something they can do from the side, but wasn't something they knew how to do in 1173. So they eventually were able to kind of right the ship a little bit, and the actual top 2 floors were constructed after it already started leaning. You can kind of tell that top version is almost more level. Even the thing is leaning on its side, so it goes up and then kind of twists over. There's 294 steps all the way to the top, if you're interested in taking that iconic picture right there. Again, cathedrals and religion in something that we see. In Rome, we have the Colosseum and old styles. If you've seen the movie Gladiator, these were the ancient football stadiums from the time when Rome ruled the world. When we see famous fountains, another thing to see in Italy, we'll translate that for you much, much later. But somebody said, hey, have you seen that big fountain? I had to add that into the presentation. I threw another fountain in here. I thought this was near Ukraine. Next, city. And of course, building cities up, we talked about building castles, building big walls so no one gets you. Well, what if you just built your city in the middle of a river? Seems like a great idea until the water table started to fall. So this is uh, one of the areas in Venice, while we're looking at the Grand Canal right there in the middle, it actually started sinking. So with the water table, to allow people to walk, they had to build elevated walkways. You can take a speedboat right up to your front door. Now, I don't know if you've ever gotten like water in your basement, but that smell may not be one that is great all the time. But at one point, this was all built above the water level, and when they pumped down into the aqueducts to get drinking water, it caused the rest of the town to kind of sink a little bit. Very famously, you can take these boat rides. They call them gondolas. It's not an oar. He's actually just pushing off of the bottom. Sometimes they'll sing to you. And there's that Grand Canal right there. You see it's fairly uh, large and can put pretty big boats in. A couple other places that we didn't really get to, skiing in the Alps and other famous mountain ranges that we didn't get to see is one of the themes as we went through these places in Italy. We threw Everest in there on the other side of the world to not have you guys get confused. So, in class, we have some studying to do. Somebody drew me a nice little picture right there. Appreciate that. So, we have test tomorrow. Make sure that you kind of know where these things are. And if we had to go through these slides, remember 13 of those things are on there. It's been a while since I've seen all those pictures of this guy here. So, making sure that you know where these places are and their capitals. You can have the rest of the class to study today. So, continue studying. I've got your last 13 minutes. You've got to make sure you've got all your PODs. If you are missing anything, map work, please turn that into me when I see you tomorrow. Good luck on your test, and I'll see you tomorrow, or arrivederci.